I have been birding for my whole life, but I still struggle with identifying birds by sight. I certainly struggle with identifying birds by sound. And I appreciate for beginner birders how frustrating it must be to begin, given that there are so many different kinds of birds. In the college courses that I teach and in the presentations that I give for the Audubon Society, one thing I encourage beginner birders to do is to separate birds into groups so that you're not trying to identify which of the hundreds and hundreds of birds that it could be, but then simply the birds in that group. And then within the group, to use some key features then to narrow it down further. So which of, say, these 7 birds might it be, this subgroup? And then within the 7, what features might you use to narrow it down to 3 or then just 2 until you identify the bird? So let's take raptors, for example, and given that I live in the northeastern US, the examples that I use will be relevant to this part of the country, although the principles, I think, will be much more broadly applicable. There are many raptors, or birds of prey, and so a first step would be to identify that a bird is a raptor. It is an eagle, a hawk, a falcon, a vulture, or an owl. These birds can be recognized by their size. The majority are larger than the average bird, although there are exceptions. By some of their features, such as having a curved, pointed beak and sharp talons, and then also by behaviors. We often see them perched in a tree where they are searching for prey, so they're staying still, which for many birds is unusual. When they fly, they often soar on air currents as opposed to flapping their wings close to the ground on short flights. Once you identify a bird as a raptor, you would like to identify then a subgroup, which group of raptors. Owls are unlike the others. Their heads are proportionally larger compared to the rest of their body. They have a disc-shaped face, and in their behavior, you are more likely to see or hear them at night or around dusk. If a raptor isn't an owl, a good feature to focus on next would be its size. And if you're familiar with the very common hawk of a red-tailed hawk, to use that as a reference. Red-tailed hawks are the largest hawks in the northeast United States, but there are some raptors which are bigger, such as ospreys, vultures, and eagles. Vultures can be distinguished between ospreys and the bald eagle, which is the most common eagle in the Northeast, because they spend less time near water and are more likely to be found near roadkill or other carrion. When they fly, and this is very important, while they have very long wings and could be confused for an eagle, their wings form a V shape when they soar. If you identify something as a vulture, you can then look at its size, because turkey vultures are a little larger than black vultures. You can look at the coloration of the head, or you can look at whether there is white on the wingtips to distinguish between turkey vultures and black vultures. If one of these big birds has white on the head, you can ask, does it have a brown eye stripe, or is the head solid white? Is the chest white, or is the white limited to the head and tail? This would help you distinguish between ospreys and bald eagles. When they fly, are the wings held straight? So if they're held straight rather than a V shape, then you know it's an eagle or an osprey as opposed to a vulture. And if the wings have a kink in them so that they often form more or less the shape of an M, that would be characteristic of an osprey. If a bird is not flying with its wings in a V shape, then it would probably be a hawk, eagle, or falcon. One can identify these from below. You may only see the silhouette of a bird flying above you. Eagles have extremely long wings and the largest size. One group of hawks, known as a buteo hawk, is the next largest in size and has broad wings and a fan-shaped tail. Smaller hawks are known as accipiter hawks. They have shorter wings and a longer tail. And then falcons have pointed wings and a long, narrow tail. And so thus, if you see one flying over you, its outline could help you narrow down what type of bird it is. If you've narrowed it down to that it is a larger buteo hawk because of the fan-shaped tail, now you could start looking at other features. So for example, does it have a white chest with a brown, say, bib going across the bottom of its chest region? Does it have a reddish tail? Is it fairly large? This would identify a red-tailed hawk. Is a little smaller than a red-tailed with a mottled chest and abdomen, which is often reddish in color? Does it have multiple white or lighter stripes on its tail? This would be a red-shouldered hawk. Is it small and having a mottled chest with a prominent large white stripe on its tail? Then it would be a broad-winged hawk. And so once you've narrowed it down to hawks, you try to identify the type of hawk, a buteo with a fan-shaped tail, and then you can look at some of these features. If you were trying to identify this hawk, you might notice the white spot on its rump. That would be characteristic of a harrier hawk. But also its habitat and its behavior, the fact that it's in a swamp or a marsh, just kind of gliding over the surface looking for rodents below. Just those two features alone, you might say, I'm going to a marsh, I expect maybe to see a harrier hawk there. This hawk is about the size of a red tail, and instead of having a bib which is mottled underneath its white chest, instead it is a solid color. But I might use the fact that it's winter in the Northeast, meaning that this is a migratory hawk, the rough-legged hawk that I might see. And I also might use the fact that it hovers as it flies, something that buteos are not known to do. And so the season and its behavior might help. Among some of the accipiter hawks, size might help you. So a goshawk, which is uncommon, approaches the size of a red-tailed hawk, while the Cooper's hawk might be the size of a crow. Females are a bit larger than males. Sharp-shinned hawks are smaller, maybe even about the size of a blue jay. Size is also helpful with the falcons. So in our area, the peregrine falcon is a larger bird and possesses a gray hood over its face, while a kestrel is smaller, blue jay sized or smaller, once again females are larger, with a black eye stripe. If I were to see another falcon which seemed in between those two during migration season, there is a third species I would consider, the merlin. And so the size, some of these distinguishing features, and also then season would help me identify these birds. If I identified a bird as an owl, and I was wondering which type of owl it was, I might look for features such as the presence of ear tufts. Was it nocturnal, or was it coming out during the day? Owls may be more likely to be heard than seen, and so I might listen to the call. And was it something that sounded something like who, or who cooks for you, or who cooks for you all, and distinguish between these birds audibly. There are other owls in our area which are smaller. Screech owls are one that might come out around dusk. Saw-whet owls would be the smallest owl in our area. This owl, the short-eared owl, might be found in a marshland, but only during winter. It is a winter resident here and then migrates farther north during the summer. So once again, I could use habitat and time of year to help me identify this bird. This video is not intended to make you an expert in identifying these birds, but give you strategies on how to approach bird identification if you're a beginner. What size is the bird? Knowing that you could use size to distinguish this bird from others. What is the overall shape of its body? If you see it flying above, what is the shape of its tail? How is it holding its wings? Are there distinguishing features like stripes on the tail? Or what is the color of the chest? Is it white? Is it mottled? What habitat is it in? What time of year are you seeing it? What does it sound like? All of these are clues that can help you start to narrow down the very large group of possible birds to much smaller and smaller groupings, which are now much more manageable.